So today I want to look at how RT, that's Russia Today, that's Russian state news, is framing and discussing what's happening in Israel. Here is a short clip, it's about 5 minutes, of Israel expands Gaza operations.
IDF now says that final preparations are underway for a significant ground operation in Gaza that will include attacks from the air, the sea, and the land. But again, it is unclear exactly when we might see boots on the ground. It was actually expected for days now since the beginning of the Israeli army operation in the street, but it is still not happening. But what we do know, hundreds of thousands of troops are expected to participate in this operation, which will make it the biggest military operation since the second war with Lebanon in 2006. Earlier, the army said that it will continue until all hostages return home. As you remember, dozens of Israelis
let's pause there for a second. She's not taking a breath for me to pause to be able to interject things. So Israel said, clear out of North Gaza, you have 24 hours, we're coming in. Now, that was a warning to civilians. If they didn't warn civilians, then the Palestinian people would say, well, they just came in and swarmed us and killed us all. And there's going to be a lot of amateur videographers in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, over the next, I don't know how long. Now, weather apparently was part of the complication, but giving those extra days is a good thing in the sense of giving Israel the argument, we told you we were coming in to get out and minimize civilian casualties. But it's a bad thing in the sense that if you're one of these militants and you're trying to hide, you can run away pretty effectively right now.
Remain in captivity in Gaza, military and civilians, including women and children, with public disappointment rising over how the government is actually dealing with this situation. Some even saying that Netanyahu should step down after the war. Meanwhile, we've seen the Israeli Prime Minister.
They're going to keep talking about Netanyahu should be stepping down. Netanyahu should step down. I've heard a lot of that already from this. And part of that is just that's going to be their narrative anyway.
Minister on the ground visiting the liberated Jewish settlements and towns in the south of Israel, some of them scenes of massacres after Hamas militants managed to enter them last Saturday, killing civilians, taking dozens hostage and clashing with the army. And over there on the ground, Prime Minister Netanyahu, just like many times before that, vowed to win the war against Hamas. But to be honest, there is a feeling that the Israeli leadership is losing the fight over its own citizens, their hearts and minds, as people are getting more and more frustrated and disappointed with how the situation develops. Meanwhile, preparations...
Losing the hearts and minds of Israeli citizens. I'm pretty sure that Israeli citizens just want to take the fight to Gaza because of the atrocities that have just happened. So I wouldn't worry about that exactly.
Are in full swing. Israel also evacuated thousands of people from the Israeli southern communities bordering Gaza, but thousands others still remain there, unwilling to leave, and that also might be causing a delay. Another reason is the reluctance of the people of Gaza to leave. During the night, the IDF made a statement saying it was very, quote, generous for the people of Gaza, giving them 25 hours to leave, and also adding that the operation cannot start without them leaving, but we still...
So it is very generous to give them a full day to get out of northern Gaza, but they can't go very far because Egypt has closed the border to Gaza and won't let their refugees out of Gaza into Egypt either. Egypt's supposed to be brother Arabs and they're supposed to be supporting, and they're really not. They'll let humanitarian aid in, but they're not letting people out. That's how together Egypt and Gaza are.
We'll see thousands of Gazans on the ground, and they do not leave for different reasons. Some of them have no place to run to. Others just do not want to leave their houses again. For others, it could be too dangerous to move around because air raids from the Israeli army continue and intensify. And others could be afraid of Hamas, that is calling for locals not to leave. But without them leaving...
So did you hear that? That's really interesting. And I'm glad that she reported that. That's one of the most honest things that she's said here is that Hamas is telling the people not to leave. Hamas wants martyrs. They want to show the images of these dead civilians that the mean Israelis did in order to make the Israelis look absolutely terrible before the Arab world and unite the Arab world against Israel. So that's the trap that Israel could potentially fall into. One of my longtime viewers yesterday said, or disagreed with me about what was going on in Israel and had a pro-Palestinian stance, and that's okay. Good people can disagree about that kind of thing. I don't think you can be good and disagree about the evil that we saw last Saturday. If you can't call that evil, something is not right in your calculus. You can disagree about two states or whether Israel should be supported or Palestine in general before what happened on Saturday. And I'm not saying that you can't go back to that position about having that political discussion later on, but we need to call evil evil when we see it. At any rate, this person who had been a longtime viewer said something like, well, I can't condone Israel's war crimes. I'm not condoning war crimes either. I don't want them to commit war crimes. I want them to be as judicious as possible in rooting out the terrorists and not killing civilians. That is the optimal solution. Unfortunately, some are going to die in the process because Hamas is also making it more difficult for the civilians in Gaza to be able to flee or escape or whatever.
Israel continues airstrikes of Gaza. We know that like thousands of targets have already been hit and thousands of tons of bombs have been dropped on Gaza. And we hear from the health ministry in Gaza that for now, around 3,000 people have been killed in 8 days of the escalation and the Israeli military operation. And more than 10,000 others have been injured. Dramatic situation, like dramatic death toll and casualties, though the IDF says that journalists should be very careful and should filter this information coming from the ground. Let's take a listen.
Okay, before they do that, before they talk about what the journalist is saying on the ground, I want to add this. I was watching another commentator talk about this, and this is an American of Jewish origin, and he made a great point that if you just do the math of what happened, not yesterday, but last Saturday, if you go when the original attack happened, it would be the equivalent, because of the size of Israel as opposed to the size of the United States, of 40 9/11s. That would be the equivalent death toll. And it was done in such a horrific way where you see them chopping up bodies in videos. Like, you have to see this for your own self to believe me, right? I'm telling you, it's out, that material's out there because they put that out there for the Arab world to enjoy. Like, see what we're doing to Israel. This is a good thing. 40 9/11s done in this horrific manner. Now, you ask yourself with that, how is Israel going to respond? And then you look at the death toll of what's going on as they are bombing these cities, and it puts it in a very different perspective.
One government. The government is Hamas. So when the so-called Gaza Ministry of Health issues information, the amount of people killed, if they were armed people or not, if they were men or women or children, obviously that information is authorized by Hamas. And it's okay for release by Hamas, and it would serve the purposes of Hamas. So when you get information, if you're a journalist, or if you're just listening to what's going on, and you get information from the Gaza Strip, please be very, very skeptical of the veracity and ask yourself, why was this information disseminated, and how does it serve Hamas and its propaganda?
Earlier, we also heard...
Right, and so that's a really good point, that Hamas is controlling the information, just like Russia controls the information coming out of the war in Ukraine from the Russian side, right? I mean, there's not independent journalists that are really, well, there are independent journalists, but they're all independent journalists who are already predisposed to provide the Russian narrative. Those are the only ones allowed, say, at like elections in Donbass or whatever else. Okay, let's keep going.
Surprising and a little bit controversial statement from the Israeli president, saying that the people of Gaza are partially responsible for what has happened, is happening, and will happen.
I'm not sure how that's surprising or controversial. The people of Gaza voted in Hamas as the government, and Hamas is the party that has been, their militarized wing has been doing this. And so there's nothing really surprising about that. We got what we voted for. I mean, that's the way that works. And even if it's a minority, it's the largest majority, or not majority like 50%, but largest coalition in the government and the ruling faction.
Here's what he has to say.
We are operating militarily according to rules of international law, period, unequivocally. It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat.
Meanwhile, Hamas is saying that it is
and there are going to be reports of civilians that get killed who have been taking up arms to kill Israeli soldiers as they come in. So, and they'll be counted as civilians, and that's going to be tragic. Okay, let's keep going.
Prepared for Israel's ground invasion, adding their 40,000 troops are ready to confront the enemy. So it is going to be even bigger and even more dramatic than it is now already.
And we're finding out a lot of bit about what's going on with, like, how Iran has been behind some of this, and we're finding out about how money has been funneled to Hezbollah through Russian sources, whether it's Russian money or otherwise. We're starting to get the bits and pieces. I don't have all the information, so I can't say, haha, it's Iran doing this or it's Russia doing that. But we can kind of see fingerprints that are left behind, and we'll trace that out over time. Okay, that's all. And RT was surprisingly not terrible here with this, but much of their programming has a very slanted side, pro-Palestine, and it's not that they necessarily want Palestine to win. They want to keep the conflict inflamed, in my estimation. And I could be wrong. Tell me what you think. I don't think, like, if they could solve the issue by making a two-state solution, they keep raising the two-state solution, but that's because they want to inflame it, not because they want an actual two-state solution. This is kind of like their claim that the Americans just want Ukraine to fight the Russians, and they want to keep grinding down Russia. They're trying to do this with Israel and Palestine. They're just trying to inflame over here to distract the world so that they can do what they're doing in Ukraine. You tell me what you think. Put it in the comments below. I'm happy to read your comments, and you don't have to agree with me. But thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.